Hello and welcome to episode 160 of The Pitcher or the Hitter, the podcast by the M-SABR Dynasty League for the M-SABR Dynasty League. I am Cam,
I'm Sahil.
and another very exciting week. We had a really big upset in one of our matchups. We had another matchup go way down to the wire, another near upset as well. A lot of intrigue in the league, and we are left with a four-way tie for second place in the midst of all this.
Yeah, this season continues to not go the way that anybody is expected. Certainly not me. And one thing I certainly was not expecting was the trade that I made. So why don't we dive into that? Um, I traded Justin Rebelski, who I got in that giant prospect trade I made with Alex. You probably couldn't name the other three prospects uh, anymore.
CJ Kafus.
No, that was a different Alex trade.
Oh,
That was just the Naylor trade. But anyways, I traded him for Starling Marte. Um, and so I had this whole plan. I was like, great, like Trey Turner's coming back. Mookie Betts had been at shortstop this entire time. And I've kind of been struggling a little bit in the back of the outfield. And I was like, okay, this kicks Mookie back to the outfield. I'm going to feel really good about the outfield situation. Like, all is good. Um, and of course, the day before Trey Turner gets back, Dan fucking Altavia just shatters Mookie's hand. He's going to be out 6 to 8 weeks. So I was like, I need a outfield replacement. It's crazy. But if you look at Starling Marte's Statcast page, you look at his numbers on a season, he actually looks pretty damn good. He's got 7 homers, 12 steals on the year, playing mostly every day. And his hard hit percentage is by far a career high at the age of 35. It's like a 46% hard hit rate. I think his highest number in a season before this was in the 39 range. So, uh, do I expect him to keep this up? Probably not. Am I just going to ride the wave for a few weeks while I can? Sure. Um, and if another outfield option comes up that's better, like, and I just have to cut Marte, or if he turns into a pumpkin in 2 weeks, like, I like Rebelski. He actually just moved up to AAA, but like, I don't really think, like, especially with the pitcher depth the Dodgers have, that I'm really going to be like, damn, like, I gave up like some top tier starting pitcher. I certainly think he could be a solid major leaguer, but I'm not losing too much sleep over him. But I do think he's a good get for Anthony, who has a little more outfield depth and was able to capitalize on my need.
yes, certainly. So your team really is going through it at the moment with all those injuries. I had no idea Marte was having the sort of season that he has been having. Um, I don't know how long I expect it to continue. There is certainly a ticking clock uh on how well he performs like this. But in the meantime, he's performing well. I don't really have a ton of thoughts on this, but Wroblewski's a decent get for Anthony. Um, yeah, I do like what Anthony's team has done this year in general. And maybe kind of looking down his roster here, um, outfield, he doesn't, it's not that he doesn't really have a need there necessarily, because you know, he's got Mike Tauchman in his lineup and he's got Jake McCarthy in his lineup. Maybe he's got something planned for a different outfielder. Um, but either way, Wroblewski is a good longer term play.
Exactly. Yeah. I think he could afford to move Marte. And honestly, if I had outfield depth and Marte was kind of hanging around, I probably would have done something similar on the opposite side. But yeah, I think Anthony makes out pretty well here. I think it's kind of a win-win. And yeah, one last thing I'll say, nice to reunite with my fifth round pick in the inaugural draft. So after I trade one outfielder who had been on my team forever, Castellanos, nice to get another one back. Um,
Yeah, just even Steven.
Even Steven, yes, now have two green squares on the inaugural draft board.
Always exciting when a green square comes back. Um,
Always exciting.
but we have a segment today. We are doing our mid-season 2024 power rankings, and I'd say they're quite a bit different than they would have been if we did them last week.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It is very different, but I'm excited to do them. And you and I separately put together rankings, and despite us doing it separately, we only had one disagreement, so we're going to do a combined rankings, and we're going to kind of point out the one difference that we have, but we are excited for this.
All right, but do we want to start here at number 12?
Yeah, let's do it. Our number 12 team was Daniel and Matt.
They are, yeah, once again, down at number 12. This would be, they have not been out of the number 12 spot since the 2021 mid-season, where I had them 12th and you had them 10th. Just kind of a return to that spot once again. If Connor hadn't beaten you this week, I would have put Connor 12th and this team 11th. But,
Ooh.
um, they've got no wins and two ties. They're struggling this season. 0-10 and 2. Just really not hitting the ball well, not pitching the ball well. Jerks and Profar has been great, but outside of that, just not a whole lot to like about this team, from what we've seen.
Yeah, I disagree that Connor would have been 12 if he would have lost to me last week. I think this team's clearly 12. I don't really see there's some interesting players, but there's nobody that really stands out to me on this team that's like, hey, this is a legitimate, like undisputed long-term, like legitimate top tier piece. And I think Connor has a couple of those, and that's the difference for me. But let's loop in Connor here. Connor's our number 11. Very nice week last week, and we'll kind of dive more into the details. I don't know where the hell that came from. Like, I think it was one of his, he just fell short of his RBI record. Like Carlos Correa is on quite the heater right now. And spoiler alert, I know you picked the matchup MVPs, but he's a matchup MVP. I'm already declaring it. But like it's there are pieces here where I feel like you look at and you're like they could be on the next great Connor team, but I still think there's a shit ton of work to do for him to get back up to that point. But nice over the last couple of weeks that he tied Daniel and Matt and then racked up a win against me. I think he has one other win on the season. So
Yeah, he has. He drew Daniel and Matt, and he got the win over you, and he's also got a big win over Yuki.
there you go. Who beat EBO? So I mean, these weeks, man, just some of these matchups, how they go are fucking insane. But yeah, I think he's heading in a better direction. There are certainly names on this team who I think are bigger contributors than a couple months ago. So I'm optimistic for him.
Yeah, I think so. And he's got, I bet he can get a decent return for Verdugo at the deadline. Um,
Yeah, everybody needs outfielders right now, it seems like.
yeah, I bet, yeah, there could be not a bidding war necessarily, but that he could get a good return. He could probably get if he was willing to give up Soler or Salvador Perez. I could definitely see him having an active
Perez, I think, will
deadline.
get a big return. Because I think
Yeah.
Perez, too, the one thing is you're not just looking at teams who need a catcher, but I think somebody could realistically slot him in their corner infield spot because he's first base eligible or their util spot. I think he could be a decent bat. Like any
Have
team needs to go kind of like Andrew would be a good example. If somebody who has a history of like going to catchers and might be willing to do something like that, especially because his first base situation is a little shaky. Like I think that would actually be a really good fit.
Yeah, I could see that. We shall see. Yeah, I mean, he's got Luis Robert, who he can build on. Luis Matos has been demoted to AAA, so 2 weeks ago, and Connor still has an open NPI spot for him. So, I guess that's something that he uh, should be doing now. He had, yeah, crazy. Connor beat you while having an open NPI spot and an NPI eligible player on his active roster in his active lineup.
Yeah, don't remind me. I'm getting PTSD from that 2021 semis matchup. And it was like, so it was 3-8-1 for a good chunk of Sunday. And I was like, this was the exact fucking score of that semis matchup. And I was just like, you're fucking kidding me. I'm gonna lose like 8-3 to 1 randomly to Conor each year for the rest of my life, and it's gonna be the most annoying thing.
We could
Um,
only be so lucky. Um, Moving on to number 10, we have, and down from 9 in the preseason rankings, we have Alex and Zach. Just kind of been, you know, playing about the same as they have over the last couple of years while still hoarding assets.
yeah, I'm having a hard time kind of figuring them out. I thought this was going to be a really pitcher heavy team. Uh, it talked about their young pitching a lot in the preseason preview. And then they traded away a bunch of that pitching. Uh, some of those trades actually look pretty decent. Some of them, like that Cole Reagans trade, have really aged poorly. Um, but I think they have some interesting young hitters to build on. I think there's more here to build upon than Daniel and Matt and Connor's team, and I think he's shown some progress with some of these assets, and like Wyatt Langford and Jackson Holiday, I think are going to improve. But now I think they've kind of flipped it here, where I think he needs a little more pitching. And I think maybe just kind of an assessment of who is actually an asset to keep and who isn't. Um, I think would certainly be helpful, especially with all these prospects that they have and 3 first-round picks coming up. So um, I think there needs to be a more cohesive plan, but I think they'll get there eventually.
Yeah, they've definitely got a lot of pieces. They don't have Julio anymore, but I mean, yeah, Devers at the corner infield is a great guy to have.
How far
Uh,
off is Devers really minus the steals, if we're being honest?
um,
I
I
don't
don't know.
think
He
it's all
certainly
that much of a
hits.
difference.
I think he's maybe at a Devers is maybe at a deeper position for our league. But
See, I don't even know about that because you start 5 outfielders, right? And then some of the util spots, some are eligible at both positions. Like, how many elite third basemen can you really name? It's like Riley and Devers
and
and
Riley's having a pretty terrible season.
he's heating up in June, but he's having a terrible season. Did you hear that story as an aside? What happened yesterday?
About Austin Riley, I don't think so.
No, so I guess when they came and played Baltimore early this week, his hitting coach like came in, used to be in the Braves organization, and Riley's been hitting the bat pretty well since then, including hitting the bat well in the Baltimore series. But his hitting coach died in a car accident on Saturday night. It was a really sad
Jeez.
story. Yeah. Um, but yeah, so he's playing with a heavy heart. Very sad to hear that. Former major
Man.
leaguer Mike Brumley, but he is heating up, so happy for him to be doing that. But okay, so it's like Devers, Riley. It's like, and a lot of the guys who are third base eligible are not going to be third base eligible uh moving forward, like Gunner, Ellie, um, you know, like I think it's like I don't know. I think it's a pretty thin position. He's got a premium player.
Yeah, I guess so. And he's got Ha-Sung Kim, and he's definitely got, you know, I mean, he can build that rotation around Logan Gilbert if he keeps him, but yeah, I agree. The pitching, there's not as much there as there has been.
Exactly. Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. As I gross just drew a Blake Snell card in MLB to show. Disgusting.
Right. But speaking of disgusting, I don't
Damn.
know. Um,
What is this what is this leading to?
I don't know. I didn't really have anything, but we're moving on to number 9. It is Yuki.
Is
Uh,
Yuki disgusting?
his team, made me feel disgusted with how my team was performing. I don't know. Um, we've got Yuki at 9. You know, Yuki plays the level of his opponents. That's what we've been saying all year. And that's just very much continued to be the case. He's got a very big win over EBO. He's beaten Andrew. He's uh, almost beaten me. He's almost beaten Ruthvik. Um, and yet at the same time, he's got a loss to Conor and, uh, you know, tied the Drury and nearly lost to the Drury another time. So he really plays the level of his opponents. He's got some good people on his team. His pitching looks maybe as good as I've seen it. Jake Irvin has been really solid. He I don't know what he's doing today, but he has 0 starters in his lineup and 7 relievers in his lineup today. Um, but either way, his pitching has looked decent. Kyle Harrison looked good before he got hurt. Hunter Brown is really, after a really rough start, has been fantastic since the middle of May. Um, but he's certainly got some issues with this team. I do like the bats he's got as well, and I could, if a couple more matchups went his way, he could have been kind of in the mix for the last playoff spot this year.
Yeah, I agree with everything you're saying. It's really frustrating because I think there is potential for more, but at the same time, he's not consistent. I think a couple things have contributed to that. I think some of his bats, who have traditionally been really good, have really struggled this year. Like Bregman had a really slow start. Riley, we just mentioned, right? Corbin Carroll's been pretty awful. Randy's been pretty awful. So honestly, for him to be at the point he's at, despite that, is pretty impressive. That being said, like, the pitching's still not great. And I think there's still some work to be done here. If somebody's hitters can heat up, I think it'll help. But like, I mean, and I still don't get this. I still have never understood why he hasn't really considered trading some of these hitters for some pitching depth. I think that's really the thing that he needs. It's not about building the best offense, it's about building the best team as a whole. And I think if he starts to do that, I think he could start rising. But otherwise, I think he's just going to kind of remain on the periphery of the playoff hunt here.
Yeah, no, I agree. There's definitely some names I could see him moving. Um, are we ready for the top 8? And I don't know if this is a tier break or if there's a tier break with this team and Yuki, but it's an interesting case nonetheless in uh, almost certainly the largest drop in power rankings history from one ranking to the next.
Yeah, Jake at 8 here. I mean, I'm just gonna read off his IL here, right? It's Ronald Acuna Jr., Evan Carter, JT Realmuto, Tristan Cassis, Michael Harris, Spencer Strider, Devin Williams, Blake Snell, Lance McCullers. Yeah, that's the only one who's like, who cares? Uh, Jose Soriano got scratched today, and Yimi Garcia landed on the IL. So that's he already has a full IL, and then he has 2 non-IL players sitting on his roster, and a third that got scratched. Although I'm guessing he dropped the Emmy. He hasn't dropped the Emmy yet. So I mean, it is like it's kind of a lost season, I think, at this point. I think Jake's kind of admitting that a little bit, and I think he's starting to discuss some moves to kind of build back towards 2025. I've said it before, I'll say it again. He traded away a lot of his depth and it's coming back to bite him. But at the same time, I don't think you expected this level of injuries. This kind of reminds me of 2020 Erik in the sense that we know it's not a bad team. It's just shit didn't work out that year. And we expect him to kind of bounce back. And that's kind of where I think Jake's at right now. I think the injuries are just going to be way too much to overcome. And it's not just the injuries, too. Like some of these players just have not been performing as well as they have in prior years. Machado hasn't been as good. George Springer's really fallen off a cliff. Matt Olson's been solid, but not quite at the pace of last year, which is just absolutely ridiculous. Like Corey Seager's been good when healthy, but he's been kind of on and off hurt. Bryce Iglesias' K rate has dropped. Ryan Presley has kind of started to fall off a bit. Brian Bayo, after a hot start, doesn't look as good. Kevin Gosman's been a bit up and down. So, like, I mean, it's just I don't I don't really know what to think here. If it's like, hey, he'll be fine with the roster he has next year, he just doesn't get there, or like a retool, or just like what. I'll also say too, a lot of these younger guys that he tried to gamble on, like prospect wise, like I'm thinking like Edouard Julian, I'm thinking Evan Carter. Some of these guys just have really not panned out. I mean, Julian got demoted. Evan Carter was awful and then got hurt. And I think he has another player sitting on his MPI. Because as a matter of fact, I think Julian, no, I might be wrong about this. I think he is somebody else was sitting on his MPI, so he had two MPI players, but I think he might have gotten rid. Oh, Miguel Vargas. Okay, but Vargas just got to replace Mookie, but I mean he's not playing that much. So man, I don't know. This team's kind of a mess.
It is. There's been a lot of worst case scenario stuff that's happened to this team. And he's got rostering a lot of Atlanta Braves, and the Atlanta Braves are having a difficult and injured season. And yeah, like you said, a lot of guys are just um, not having the best seasons, or just dealing with all of these insane injuries. I think having more depth would have helped certainly, but at the same time, there's no helping yeah, like Real Muto getting hurt and Casas getting hurt um is just going to be tough for a team no matter what. I'm not sure how much I agree with the 2020 Erik comparison. Um, Other than it's a just I guess from a historic perspective, yeah, team won back-to-back titles and then is looking like they might miss the playoffs entirely the following year. Um, it feels like it's kind of happened in very different ways. Um, Jake's team dealing with a ton of injuries, and Erik just kind of maybe having a managerial style that does not fit a roto regular season, and a weird regular season. It was a weird year. That is for
So
sure.
I think they're both similar in the sense that like they're not really things we expect to be chronic long-term issues. It's more of, hey, this is just kind of a down year.
Yeah, that is true.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it is certainly a down year. But he's got Mason Miller. And maybe the A's are trying to trade Mason Miller for long-term help. Maybe Jake tries to trade Mason Miller. I can't imagine he would, but you never know. Yeah,
I
I
kind
think
of think
he'll.
he can't at this point. Like, unless somebody's willing to overpay, but I don't see who's going to overpay for closer.
Yeah, that is.
Unless they really think they're going to eventually run him into the rotation and he's going to become an ace, which I think is certainly possible, but I wouldn't gamble on that with that injury history.
Yeah, and EBO has already paid overpaid for a closer. Uh, so
I,
I don't know who
I
else.
think there are cheaper closers who will be just as good, or maybe not just as good, but will maybe get you like 80% of his performance for like 50% of the price.
I mean, Ryan Stanek's getting saves and he's on the block for a third.
Hey, Chad Green's now getting saves, and Andrew just put him on the block. Josh Hader can be had for a pretty reasonable price. You
Yeah,
never know.
you never know. But yes, let's move on. We've talked a lot about Jake's team this year. Moving on, we have uh we'll call it a tie for sixth, I suppose. We had these teams swapped. I had Ruthvik 6, Andrew 7. You had Andrew 6, Ruthvik 7. Why don't we kind of talk about them in tandem?
Yeah, I think they're very similar in the roto. I think they both have pretty solidly constructed teams. They were both in the semis last year. The difference for me is I think that Andrew's team is just a bit better overall. I think having Bobby Wood Jr. certainly helps. As much as I like Julio, I think Bobby Wood Jr. is kind of on another tier. Um, and I kind of trust some of the ancillary pieces that Andrew has more than I trust Ruthvik's. I still am a little worried about some of the, like the Bo Bichettes of the world, and the who else here? Like the Nico Horners. Like I don't feel the Tyler O'Neills. Like I don't feel as good about some of those secondary guys as like I do Andrew's secondary guys. So yeah. That's why I had Andrew above him, even though Andrew's behind him in the standings.
That's fair. I think Ruthvik, I mean, being in that big hunk of teams tied for second, has had a really solid start to the season. I definitely get being worried about some of his individual guys, and I guess we've always, for as long as we've had this podcast, there's been a concern about his ancillary guys. I think maybe he has more depth than he has in a little while. In general, he's not,
Offensively, yes.
yeah,
Offensive.
offensively, he's really only got one WTF guy in his lineup, Otto Lopez. Normally he's got about two or three. And he's actually rostering two bench bats, which is, surprising for him. That being said, yeah, um, yeah, I'm not sure where I expect these two teams to be at the end of the season. It could be a very interesting fight for perhaps the last playoff spot. Andrew's team, they've beaten me twice. Definitely don't want to underestimate them. He's got a good lineup. He's got a pretty deep lineup as well. Jamer Candelario is really heating up. Um, so is TJ Friedel until he got hurt today. Kyle Schwarber is heating up as well. So he's got some guys that are heating up for sure. Um, Pitching looks solid too. I think this is a good team. He's had some struggles. Some of them have been self-inflicted. Um, I
Yeah.
think right now Ruthvik has been playing better though.
Yeah, and I think for me, right, when I'm doing these power rankings, I'm kind of looking at like where are the teams in the standings right now, where are they in the roto, and then where are they kind of I think how do I project them moving forward? And while I think Ruthvik is better in the standings right now, it's only by a game, and I think that Andrew is better in the and they're about the same in a roto, but I do project Andrew better in the long term, or for the rest of the season at least.
Okay, well, we'll see. Moving on to the top five. And in number five, we have the team that's currently in fifth place. That is Anthony. Anthony dropped from first place to fifth place with one very narrow loss to EBO. Dropped from first to fifth in the regular rankings. I don't think this dropped him that far uh, in the power rankings, that is, but a very interesting case where uh, one matchup and a couple of steals by EBO really made a difference to Anthony's season, perhaps.
Yeah, and I'm gonna give a comparison here for Anthony as a real life team. I think Anthony's like the Brewers. The Brewers are having a very good season. I think they're in first place in the Central still, uh, by like a pretty
By
decent.
quite a bit, yeah.
But if you look up and down that lineup, right, I don't think you look and you're like, wow, this is just like a star-studded team. Like they got William Contreras, right? He's an absolute stud. Um, and Yelich is still a very above average, very good player, right? But like it's a lot of like Joey Ortiz or Blake Perkins or Bryce Terang, right? Or Colin Array, right? Just random relievers who you've never heard of before this season. They plucked Brian Hudson out of obscurity, right? Um, and that's kind of what Anthony's team makes me think of. There's no real star. I mean, you could say Mike Trout when he's healthy, but he hasn't been healthy. Actually, ironically, Willie Adames might be the closest he's got to that right now. The Brewer, and Freddie Peralta on the pitching end, also a Brewer. Although he's actually struggled a little more than I thought this year. But so it's working right now because he has a lot of solid players with some interesting depth. So I think it's enough to get him to the playoffs. What worries me is I don't think he has a couple of players who can necessarily carry him if like shit hits the fan, right? I think he's a little reliant on that depth, and I think it's going to get him a playoff spot, but I'm unsure if he gets past the first round.
We'll see. I mean, remembering the roto from a couple weeks ago, he is playing like a playoff team. Um, he's definitely. I think the Brewers comparison is definitely interesting. He's maybe a little bit above his skis more than the Brewers are. Um, I mean, he's beaten you twice. He's got that tiebreaker over you, which could come in handy. It kind of reminds me a little bit of his the 2021 version of his team where he made the playoffs, had a solid season, started out super hot. I think he was in second place at the halfway point of the season. Really had a good start and then cooled off, but still did just enough to make the playoffs. I'm kind of feeling getting reminders of that version of his team. I think yeah, I'm not sure what to think of this team in the long run, and I'm not sure what to think of say what he should do at the deadline. But right now he's a top five team in the league.
Yeah, absolutely. Do I think necessarily if I had to pick a roster between Andrew and Anthony, would I pick Anthony's roster? I'm not sure, but I do know he's playing better right now, and I think there's enough of a difference there that I have to give him credit for that.
Yeah, fair enough. Let's move on to the top four, and this is a surprise. You are number four.
Yeah. Here's what I'll say about my team. If you look at the Roto, the last time we did the Roto, I think about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, I was the number one team. Um, I think Erik might be beating me now. We meant to run the Roto today, but didn't have a chance. Neither of us did. But like I think I'm probably number two. Um, I don't think I have a bad team. I don't think that the team is constructed as not one that is not capable of making the playoffs. I do think there's a couple of tough luck losses where I played very well, but just stuff didn't quite work out. I do think I was a victim of just a random spurt by Conor last week, which happens over the course of the season. But my team just hasn't consistently been getting it done. I know injuries have had quite an effect. I mean, we talked about Trey Turner and Mookie Betts earlier, right? Garrett Cole's been out all year. He'll be back on Wednesday. I've been rostering Gavin Williams, despite him being out all year. Woodruff's out for the year, Bautista's out for the year. Suzuki's missed some time, Albies has missed some time. Both of them came back and took a little while to kind of get going again. Um, there's been a lot of positive developments with like Westberg really breaking out, and I'm really encouraged by what I see in Cowser. I think there's some younger guys who have really started to break out. Joey Ortiz, Josh Naylor. Like I think I mentioned it last week. I've kind of flipped the number of like 32 and older bats I've had and 27 and younger bats. Those numbers have flipped. So my team's now younger, and I feel really good about that. This kind of reminds me of my 2022 team that never really just seemed to get into a roll at any point during the season. But on the flip side, last year at this time, so I did have a better record. I was 8-4. I'm 6-5-1 right now. And I think this would be a very different conversation if I beat Conor and I was 7-4-1 as an aside, being only a half game back of that. But I remember after being 8-4 last year, I was really annoyed and I was like, man, like this team's not doing well. Like I lost to Daniel and Matt in week 12. I was like, I lost back-to-back games. I was like, this is rock bottom. And then I didn't lose again until the finals. And I certainly, while I don't expect I'm just going to go undefeated the rest of the way, I think I have the pieces with some of these guys getting healthy too, Garrett Cole getting back, right? Where I think I can make a run. I know I'm not in the playoffs right now, but I'm only a game and a half back of first place. There's going to be plenty of opportunities to make up ground over the next 10 weeks. I think when it's all said and done, I'm probably a playoff team. I don't think I'm going to get a bye again like I have in previous years, but I think I was like 2 games behind a bye last year at this point, and or 2 games out of the 1 seed, and I ended up getting it. And I'm realistically only a game behind these teams that are in place for the or slated for the bye right now, whoever is slated for the second seed. So I'm going to keep at it. Is it frustrating? Sure, but I still think there's a lot of potential with this team, and hopefully I start to hit my stride here. Um, I do that. That being said, I think there are 3 teams ahead here that are similar or better in the roto. And given my record and the way my teams performed over the last 6 weeks, I can't justify putting myself ahead of either of those 3 teams, despite the fact that I still think from a pure roster perspective, like if you had to give me a team to pick for the rest of the season, I think I would take myself over you and EBO. I don't know if I'd take myself over Erik, but I'd still take me over you and EBO the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mean, power rankings, you're trying to balance talent level and performance level. Your talent is there, the results have not been, and we're kind of I in my mind, you're probably going to finish around fourth in the regular season standings when it's all said and done. So four feels like, like a pretty decent spot for you now. Um,
It could be. I will say it could be a different conversation in 2 weeks on the seating. So I would hold off on making like kind of generalizations around that. It's not like there's like 3 or 4 games separating these teams. I mean, there is a 2 game difference for the top 8 teams. I mean, you're talking about one team going 0-2 and another team going 2-0, and all of a sudden the team that was like 1 or 2 drops to like 6 or 7 fast. I think it's hard to put seedings on these teams right now.
I think that's certainly fair. I mean, so much is going to come down to tie breaks at the end of the year.
Right. I play Jake this week and I play you next week. If I win this week, and even if you win this week, um, uh, there's a scenario after the end of next week if I was to beat you by a certain margin that I would be ahead of you in the standings. Right. And that's the complete split from where we're at right now.
I mean, you've already, yeah, that's true. I have the tiebreaker over you currently. You'd have to beat me by a certain amount to flip that. We will see. Let's move to the top three, though. Third, we have the biggest jump in the power rankings so far this year. It's EBO.
Yeah, well deserved. I really like how they've been going about things. I love them kind of being aggressive and going out and getting Emmanuel Clase and Ryan Pepio a couple weeks ago. And I fully expect with the deep arsenal of prospects and picks and other interesting players that they have, that they're going to make another move. And I think that this is, I mean, I think they might still be a year early in terms of like winning a championship. And I say that because, I've talked about the ups and downs of this team, just because of some of their young guys. And I'm looking and I'm like, hey, CJ Abrams is really struggling after a hot start. And I know like Willier Abreu's landed on the IL, and I think he's kind of cooled off a little bit. And trying to think of some other names here off the top of my head, but like, they're going to kind of go through some of those ups and downs like that. Riley Green has been he's been better lately, but I know he kind of struggled a little to start the season, right? Cole Keith has really struggled. So um, I think they're a year early for winning it, but like I don't see why this isn't a team that's going to be in the semifinals the way they've been playing and the way they're constructed.
Yeah, no, I agree. They look great. I'm positive they're going to make a big swing at the deadline. What it is, I don't know, but they're going to do something, and they're going to give up a lot of pieces for it. I have no doubt about that. And yeah, they've been playing really well. Lost to Yuki notwithstanding, um, they're 8-4. They are just kind of tight in that mix with all of these teams.
Yeah, absolutely. They're holding their own now. No, I mean that loss to Yuki was big. I think if they had lost or tied Anthony last week, I think maybe it's a different discussion. I think maybe I would have put them four and I would have put me three, but the way they've been playing right now, I have a hard time justifying not putting them in the top three.
Yeah.
This is definitely a team on the up and up. I'm not looking forward to having to play them again.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I am lucky that I have already played them twice and won't have to play them again till maybe the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. You ready to discuss our number two team?
Yeah.
You sound
Um,
excited for it. It's you.
oh, I didn't realize that you had started recording.
Yeah, yeah, I had.
Yes, it is me. I am number two. I gave a fun stat. We have done power rankings now. We have had this is our 13th list um for power rankings here. No, this is our 11th list. Uh Combined, we've done some combined rankings. We've done weeks where we have put together our own lists. Either way, that comes out to 11 total lists. I have never been higher than second or lower than third. I have been second or third in every single power ranking list, and this one's no exception. I am the model of consistency here, I guess. For soccer fans, I'm Tottenham. For um, people who, I don't know, across other sports here, Ruthvik will probably get that one at least. I'm just, always number two or number three.
Yeah. You are always number two or number three. I don't have a ton to say about your team other than you are having a very good season. I wish you cut Jeff McNeil. You already cut Jared Kelenic, and I attribute that to all of your success. But I'll let you talk about your team.
Yeah, I don't really have a ton to say either, besides what I'll probably say in the during my matchup. I feel good about my team. I don't necessarily feel better than I have in previous years. It's tough for me to I'm struggling with diagnosing a thing I should go after or and kind of players I feel comfortable moving. I don't know if I have a big move in me. I don't really know what I want to do yet at the deadline. I mean, I'm definitely obviously a buyer, but am I buying a pitcher? Am I buying a bat? Am I making just some smaller moves and biding my time like I like to do?
So,
Uh,
so what you're
yeah.
saying is the pitcher or the hitter? Is that what you're deciding? Asking
The
the age-old question?
the pitcher or the hitter or the couples or the reliever or the couple small moves, or do I want to move off a closer? Do I want to get a new closer? Do I want I don't know. I really feel and maybe that's patience is a virtue. I like my team in general. I would like to uh not have Pete Crow Armstrong on my team in the next month or so. I would love to have traded him for someone good. So offer away. But yeah, I definitely feel good about my team. I don't feel amazing about it, but I don't know how to get from feeling good to feeling great about it. And the finals isn't always won by a team who feels great about their team going in. Um, it doesn't matter how well my guys are playing now. Soto and Judge are great, but that doesn't matter. What matters is how well they hit the middle of September. And that's really what it comes down to. I I certainly feel like my team's in a good position. I'm second in the power rankings, so it's not many not much further up you can go, but yeah, there's a hump I have to get over for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're kind of in a position where you can kind of let the market kind of come to you. And if you see an upgrade, you can go for it. I certainly think you have the pieces you can trade to go and get an upgrade. And maybe it's not an upgrade, maybe it's just kind of, clearing out PCA, kind of clearing out some of those extra pieces so that you do have, the roster spots to, stream or to call up somebody else. Maybe Junior Caminero comes up, right? And that's the other thing too. It might not be a trade acquisition. Maybe it's Caminero comes up. Maybe um, Kershaw is about to start a rehab assignment here. Maybe McClanahan comes back, right? Maybe Tyler Mahle comes back. Actually, I think he might be out for the year, but I could be wrong about that one. But so like, I think you know there are certainly ways for your team to improve that might fit more with your philosophy of not kind of making this just like giant acquisition a la like stuff I do frequently. So yeah, I like your team. I think it's a solid team. As long as Judge and Soto are hitting, you're going to be a threat. And as long as Zach Wheeler does not pitch like he did yesterday in Baltimore.
Zach Wheeler on Mother's and Father's Day has been blown up both times, and every single other start this year, he has been his dominant self. So that's just kind of an odd stat.
Yeah. Who did he pitch against on Mother's Day?
I
Yeah.
don't think it was that good of a team.
Okay, because I was gonna say like the Orioles yesterday. I mean, it was just the Orioles offense, right? I mean, Gunnar, Adley, Cowser, and Westberg all homered.
Oh
Like,
yeah, it was the Marlins that blew him up on Mother's Day.
oh God. Uh, Jake Berger, I guess. Or
Yeah, it happens. I'm
no, I know. Zach Wheeler is probably the best pitcher in fantasy right now on a seasonal basis.
which if I've got the best pitcher and the two best hitters in baseball, perhaps I gotta do what it takes to win the championship this year.
This certainly feels like one of your years, right? Jake and I are not playing as well. I think EBO is there, but not all the way there. And I think it's kind of you and Erik.
It is, and let's talk
Now,
about
right?
Erik.
I'm not saying things can't change over the next month, and maybe we're having a different conversation. But this really feels ripe for you for the taking.
It does, but the team in my way is a team that has already beaten me this season. It is Erik. You know, he had a kind of a rough first few weeks of the season, but all of a sudden you luck up. He is in first place. He has been just really dominating teams. Not so much this week, but in general, he's been dominating teams. He has won four in a row and six of seven. And uh, he's definitely got the inside track for a bye and a path to the finals again.
Yeah, I mean, he is dominating. Even some of his losses, like I remember his loss to me. I mean, he had a fantastic week, but like, yeah, this is Erik. Erik looks as good as he's ever been. He's getting healthier too. Not having Ohtani pitch sucks, but like Scherzer and DeGrom are coming back as he puts Verlander on the block, literally as we are talking about him. But I, I think the only thing I think could maybe sink him is the fact that he essentially punts two categories. I still don't love that, although he does do a little bit of Holt streaming. The other thing that has me a little worried, and I mean, he always seems to prove me wrong with it, and it's just not the way I go about things, but I get that's how he does it, is if he kind of picks some of these wrong guys to stream in a playoff matchup, some of these hitters who are hot.
Yeah, like he's had Paul DeYoung on his roster for the past week. Paul DeYoung has been playing well, but at the same time, maybe he picks up Paul DeYoung at his highest value and he just sucks for a week during the playoffs.
Exactly. That's my only concern. And Erik does a good job of timing it, but I mean, shit happens, right? I mean, sometimes it doesn't work out perfectly the way you draw it up.
Yeah, that is true, and it normally does for Erik, to be fair, but yeah, we shall see.
Yeah. So those are our power rankings. Let's um let's move on to the matchups unless you have anything else to say.
All right, yeah, let's get into them, and we can be quick with these. We've already talked a lot about every team this episode. We have an upset though to talk about. We've teased it. You lost to Connor.
Uh yeah, let's just rip the Band-Aid off here. Um Last Sunday, so 8 days ago from the time of recording, I had 4 home runs and 18 RBIs. That Sunday. I thought my offense was doing great. It took me until the Saturday of my matchup against Conor, like towards the end of the day on Saturday, for me just to like match that RBI total. And I tied that home run total. Like Sunday I hit great, but by then it was too late. Conor just had an awesome hitting week that just kind of came out of nowhere. 14 homers, 57 ribbies, 42 runs. Um, Led by, I mean, Carlos Correa, right? I mean, and you'll break that down a bit more, but it's funny because I was the one who traded him Correa last year in that trade to get Marcus Semien. And while I am very glad to have Marcus Semien, I do not like the fact that Conor is Carlos Correa right now. On the pitching side, I did a lot of streaming on Sunday to try and get back into it. Joey Estes blew up in my face, which really inflated the ERA and WHIP, but it also, in general, was not my best pitching week. Uh, Connor, the ERA came up as the week went on, but not to a level where it really hurt him. And he just outplayed me. I mean, just have to give him credit. His team played very well this week. I used all 8 of my ads. He didn't use a single ad. I mean, my team didn't have it this week, and his team did. And that, boys and girls, is why we play the matchups and not just do everything on paper. Uh,
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, you mentioned great week from Carlos Correa. He is indeed the matchup MVP. We got to give a shout out to Andrew Vaughn on the hitting side as well. Also drove in 9 runs with 3 homers, which was the same as Carlos Correa. Correa just did it with better OBP and some other stats. Decent week for Jake Berger. Great week for Jorge Soler, who had a 538 OBP. And then pitching wise, he outpitched you too, with a uh, great performance from Kyle Gibson. Casey Mize pitched well, um, and just some good bullpen work from guys like Cade Smith and Kyle Finnegan.
yeah, he needs to trade Kyle Finnegan to someone before the Nationals trade Kyle Finnegan.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. But yeah, unless there's anything you want to say about your matchup, we can move quickly through these here.
No, I don't have anything else. Yeah, let's move on. What do you want to talk about next?
Yeah, let's talk about the one that went down to the wire. EBO with a very crucial 7-5 win over Anthony. Um, very, very important matchup, and definitely lived up to the hype. Uh, I know EBO. Yeah, why don't you break down how it ended? I know there were some big last day steals.
Yeah, so basically, EBO needed some steals by I think they needed one steal by David Hamilton in that Sunday night Boston New York game uh to be able to win it. And Jose Trevino is behind the plate for New York. He's one of the worst catchers in terms of throwing out base runners. And the Red Sox ended up stealing nine bases, which was a franchise high in a game. So David Hamilton, I think, stole 4 of them. Let me pull up. It's either 3 or 4. I think it was 4. So that was more than sufficient. In fact, EBO he stole second for them to tie steals, and then he stole another base immediately after that. He did steal 4 bases. And then today he leaves the game with some sort of, I think it was like a hamstring injury. I don't know for sure. Somebody can correct me on that. I'm sure the listeners will know by the time the podcast actually comes out. But it's almost like he knew EBO needed just enough to get through Sunday, and then was like, "I'm gonna peace out. Like I did my job. I carried the team on Sunday, so you're welcome." But yeah, that was a pretty epic ending in a season where I feel like EBO's had quite a few of those. Just Sunday, the last game on Sunday has ended up really well for them. I was a victim of one of those as well.
They have. Yeah, no, big week for David Hamilton here. I think I'll just give a matchup MVP on the back of that performance alone. He also had a decent on base percentage, scored 6 times, hit a homer, drove in 4 runs. With a shout out to Riley Green, who drove in 11 runs. And a good week for CJ Abrams and Colt Keith as well. Both teams pitched really solidly. Neither team hit amazingly. Anthony had some really great pitching performances, though. Shout out um, to Brandon Pfaadt and Cal Quantrill. You know, Rocky's starting pitching. Quantrill's been fantastic this year. Anthony just couldn't quite do enough on the hitting side to get it done.
Yeah, as an aside, every time I think of CJ Abrams, it makes me think of JJ Abrams.
Yeah, no, I have thought that since he got drafted.
Oh God. Love it. Yeah, I have nothing else to add here. Next matchup.
Yeah, next matchup here. There's a few. Why don't we talk about mine? Because it was an interesting one. I trailed Yuki for a good chunk of the week, but in the end, we kind of knew the whole time it was going to come down to uh, can I out quantity Yuki on Sunday? And I was just barely able to out quantity Yuki on Sunday, and I got a 6-4-2 win. Um, Thanks in large part to Colin Ray, who had uh, quality start on Sunday against the Reds with 6 strikeouts, which was enough to win me Ks by 1 and to tie quality starts. That was really exactly what I needed.
Yeah, so do you remember last week when we were talking about Anthony versus Jake? And I was like, well, one thing that really impressed me about Anthony's team was that things just were not going right for him, his team, and he still found a way to pull out a tie. And I was like, that's kind of the hallmark of a good team.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is how I feel about your matchup this week. You were awful pitching, but you were able to quantity in the strikeouts. You were able to rack up enough quality starts to tie. You're able to get a hold, right? Offensively, you did well, so that certainly helped. But and that's why you tied, whereas Anthony, or why you won, whereas Anthony tied. But last week, so I. Just great performance by you. And if you keep performances like, or great win by you, not a great performance. And if you keep this up, right, I think there's no reason you can't, go far.
Yeah, just absolute Murphy's Law um, pitching performance for me here. Um, uh, Simeon Woods Richardson gave up 4 runs in the first inning. Framber Valdez sucked. Zach Wheeler got blown up. Um, Hector Neris, Mark Leiter, I tried to stream a hold, got blown up. Lucas Sims, I tried to stream a hold, he got blown up. Mitch Keller had a bad start. Clay Holmes got a loss. Um, just absolutely terrible week there. Tanner Houck allowed 3 whole runs, which is the most he's allowed since May 10th. Still getting a quality start though, so can't hate that too much.
Not
I
beautiful.
would love to give, yeah, would love to give a shout out to no, I've already given a shout out to Colin Ray. Would love to give a shout out to Jordan Montgomery, who has just been absolute garbage all season, but did just enough on Sunday. 5 innings, 5 shutout innings, with 7 strikeouts to really put me into a position where Colin Ray could seal the deal.
All in Ray. There we go.
Yeah, Colin Ray. Matchup MVP though. We haven't talked about my hitting. I hit the ball really well this week though, regardless. Not gonna go too deep into it. Matchup MVP though has got to be Jackson Merrill, who homered 4 times with a 409 on base percentage.
There you go. Yeah, another one of those young guys you call up, and I feel like there's one a year that seems to pan out for you nicely.
Yeah, hopefully that continues well into the future. And maybe uh yeah, maybe Junior Caminero is the next one of those.
Uh, maybe.
All right. Moving on though. Where do we want to go next?
Uh, your pick. I don't know.
Andrew versus Jake had some intrigue here. Andrew got the win, dropping Jake to 5-4-3 and bumping Andrew up to 7-5. Um, this was one um, kind of. I feel like Jake had a very similar week to me, except he just couldn't quite get the pitching quantity that I did in order to pull out the win.
Yeah, and honestly, I'll say this matchup, the final score looks closer than it actually was. Like it was like 10-2, 11-1 at points this week. I think Jake had a pretty decent hitting week. Obviously, 20 doubles, 45 runs is great. And then I think on the pitching side, just I mean, it's kind of been the story of his team where like when he quantities his tries to quantity his way to a win, just the quality isn't there. So like he's doing so much streaming and it's not good streaming that he's doing. Um I mean it's good enough in pinches, but it's not something you want to rely on all the time. And I think it's just really wild. There's just a limit to what you can do. And I think this is a good example of it. Andrew used less starts but had more quality starts, like and the same number of strikeouts.
Yeah, no, that is crazy. Yeah, Jake hit well enough, but yeah, 5 ERA, not really going to cut it for him, especially when Andrew had a beautiful pitching week, led by matchup MVP Eric Fetty, who struck out 10, had two quality starts, 208 ERA, 108 WHIP. Really great week for him. Uh, yeah, another shout out on the pitching side. Yennier Cano got a hold for him. Dead Neil Nunez got a hold for him. Amazing name. He's been fun in the chat. Also struck out five. Not a whole lot to write home about hitting wise, though, except for Jamer Candelario, who is absolutely killing it this past couple weeks.
Yeah, no, good for him. Um, sure you're happy too, that he is finally heating up.
I certainly am.
All right, who's left?
Um, we got two matchups left. I would love to get through this as soon as possible because the Celtics are about to enter the fourth quarter. Next closest remaining matchup, Erik had a 7-4-1 win over Alex that never really seemed particularly close, although Alex, I guess, was in striking distance in a couple categories.
Yeah, good for Alex to kind of keep it as close as he did. But yeah, I mean, 21 homers, 50 ribbies, 57 runs by Erik is dominant. And then he had a very Erik pitching week with a 2.05 ERA. Damn, I mean that's extra low. Yeah, I mean just a great week for Erik. What he's been doing recently and just dominating teams. So I don't really anything else to add to that.
Yeah, no, Corbin Burns, two quality starts. He's matchup MVP, 13 Ks in 13 innings, 138 ERA. Just a fantastic week for him. With a shout out to Michael King, who struck out 12 batters in 5 innings, which is just nuts. Um, Great start for Tyler Glasnow. Great start for Chris Sale. I've been eating a lot of Chris Sale Crow this season. Um, Hitting wise, 57 runs, just a tremendous hitting week. Shohei hit 4 homers, 440 on base, also stole a base. Uh, Great week for Marcell Ozuna as well. And Lane Thomas hitting 3 homers. He's been a staple in that Erik lineup.
There you go. Yeah, well said.
All right.
Who'd you pick for matchup MVP?
Corbin Burns.
Oh, that's right. You said that. Okay. Who's
All
left?
right.
Think of
So one matchup is left, and that is easy win for Ruthvik against the Drury.
him.
God, both teams kind of sucked this week, but Ruthvik uh, won by a lot.
Yeah, Daniel Mack couldn't hit for shit, and their bullpen counting stats were solid. Not really much elsewhere. Ruthvik had just a good enough hitting week, although he had a 270 OBP and then it pitched barely well enough. I mean, a 447 versus 446 ERA to kind of win him there. I mean, one of those, hey, like you didn't play well, but you won weeks. Like you just kind of have to take it. And good for him. Yeah,
Y-
that a ton of confidence for me.
Yeah, I agree. It's tough to pick a matchup MVP. Look at Christian Walker, 4 home runs, 8 RBI, doubled, scored 5 runs, which is great, but he also had a 259 on base percentage this week, um, which is just crazy. I think it'll probably go to Christian or to Anthony Santander, who had a very similar batting week, but with a much better on base percentage. Shout out to uh, I can't pick a reliever. He got 4 holds from 4 different guys and 4 saves from 4 different guys. And in total, that's 7 different relievers. Yohan Duran got one of each, but he only struck out two in 3.1 innings. I don't think there was really. I Jesus Luzardo was all right. There's not one player on this team who I would even say had a good all-around week, um, which is kind of shocking. I'll give it to Stephen Kwan, actually. I've changed my mind. He had a 609 on base, no homers, but he doubled 3 times.
Very fair. Yeah. You ready for our matchup to watch?
Yeah, so speaking of Ruthvik, he plays me this week in a matchup of two teams tied for second place. I feel like this is a pretty with some nods, I feel like it's pretty safe to say that we're the matchup to watch.
Oh, I would disagree wholeheartedly.
Ooh.
I think it's me versus Jake because I think the stakes are a lot higher here. Jake and I are meeting last year's two finals teams are meeting in week 13 with neither team slated to make the playoffs. Uh, I won the first matchup against him. If Jake were to lose and if Andrew were to win, um, then or I guess if either me or Jake lose and Andrew were to win, we would fall a game and a half out of the fifth seed. And if I were to lose, or if Jake were to lose, it would definitely functionally be a game and a half back of a playoff spot. Um, or sorry, two games out of a playoff spot, I think, roughly. And then if I were to lose, and a game and a half back of me in seventh. Uh, and if I were to lose, I would be, depending on how the tiebreaker works, either that same game and a half or just a game back of him for the 7th seed. So, like, this feels like a must. I mean, this is a must win, I feel like, for both teams. And I think this is going to determine the direction of both teams, especially Jake, because I could see Jake um starting to sell some pieces, some of the older pieces off if he loses this week.
Yeah, I can certainly see that. That's fair. Yeah, my matchup is also a playoffs rematch as well, although not a finals rematch like yours. Last matchup I want to shout out though, EBO versus Erik is a big one as well. If I win and if EBO wins, then I am in first.
Guess I have to root for Erik then.
Mhm. Uh, then in that case, Erik would be in first, which I don't think you'd like either.
Uh, I don't think any of this is a situation that I particularly like at the moment, but I am in it, so I have to make the best of it.
Right. But yes, let's pick these here. Who
Yeah,
is
let's let,
picking
let's
first?
quickly run through last week. We let's see. I picked myself to win, as did you. That was wrong. We both picked Ruthvik. We both picked Andrew. We both picked Erik. I picked you. You picked yourself to tie. It came pretty close to tying, but not quite. And then I picked Anthony. You picked EBO. EBO won, so you make up ground there. All right. I'm not even gonna go and calculate in the interest of time, and we don't have the week 11 standings plugged in there. So I think we're either tied or I'm a half game ahead of you, but I don't know off the top of my head. I'm
All right, why don't you pick
fully
first?
okay. I'll go. I will pick. Uh, God. I'll pick Andrew to beat Yuki, but again, it's Yuki. Like stranger things can happen there. I'll pick Anthony to beat Conor. I'm really tempted to pick Conor to win two in a row, but I'm not doing that. I think he's going to turn back into an absolute pumpkin this week, and we're going to be like, how the fuck did he do that week 12? The rest of these are all relatively close. I think Alex will beat Daniel and Matt. Uh, I think Erik will beat EVO. I think you will beat Ruthvik. And I think Jake's going to beat me.
Interesting, interesting. I think I will beat Ruthvik. I think as much as I want to pick the Drury, just saying, hey, they got to win one of these. I think I'm going to pick Alex and Zach. I think Andrew will beat Yuki. I think, you know, I'll pick EBO over Erik. I'll try and manifest that into happening. I think Erik's got the better team, but I'll go with EBO just to be different. I think Anthony will beat Conor, and I think you will have no problem with Jake.
Interesting. All right, there you have it. In time, I hope for you to watch most of the Celtics fourth quarter, if not all of it.
Looks like I have already missed close to half of it, but yeah, let's get out of there and go Celtics.
Yeah, they're up by 21. It looks like a leading trip tonight.
All right. Love to see that. Yeah, till then, yeah, see you next week. And yeah, banner 18.
This podcast is good.